All right, so we're back once again with the CEO of DDM Group, my man Neil Nelson, and I call it views from the C-suite myself, but getting another perspective on just life, business and everything else in between. And Neil, we were talking a little bit. I know yesterday would have been your father's 81st birthday, and he has since transitioned. So tell me a little bit about that backstory. Obviously, you came from Jamaica to the United States, and your parents sacrificed quite a bit for you and your siblings to be present. So give us a little insight on on that transition up until now, building an eight-figure business and having all the success that you've had. You come from humble beginnings.
Yeah, yeah. My dad would have been 81 years old yesterday, as you mentioned, and he came to the United States in the early 1980s, probably about 81, I want to say. And like many people in the Caribbean, Africa, Latin America, elsewhere, you, you want to get to a place where there are more opportunities, better opportunities, and being being born in an environment where there is a great a great level of poverty and wanting to find an environment where you can utilize your skills to produce more, to do more for yourself and for your family, is what really inspired him to come to the United States. And he came here as a farm worker in a farm worker program, first to Florida, where he was involved in the sugarcane industry, and then to New England, where he was involved in picking apples as a farm worker. Despite the fact that was already a skilled tradesman,
Mm.
before he came to the United States, my dad was building houses in Jamaica, and
Mm.
so once he got to America and and started exploring other options, he went into obviously that profession of construction, and so
It seems humbling,
yeah,
Neil. You know what I mean? That seems like a very humbling transition. I mean, we talk about that, and I like to use the term African cab driver because you never know who that person was in their original country. But do you recall some of your conversations with your father about having to humble himself? And I know you said you spoke about him picking tobacco even at one point in time.
yeah, no, all of it. I mean, I think that one of the things that my dad has taught us, me in particular, is to be humble and uh, don't think that anything is too good for you to do, as long as it's legal, it's respectable. All work is respectable work as long as you can earn an income for yourself and for your family. So he was willing to do whatever was legal to make a living for himself and for his family. And eventually, having us come to the United States, we came here legally, and seeing the kind of sacrifices that he made, and him sharing with us those sacrifices, and not just him too, but also his own father. Like his own father, prior to even him being born, his dad went to Cuba, I think, and lived in Cuba, if I'm not mistaken, for maybe 10 or 14 years, in search of greener pastures as well. And then having returned to Jamaica, where he met his wife, my grandmother, and on the paternal grandmother, and they got married and had children. But the the tradition of going abroad to look for opportunities as something that was in the bloodline, if you will.
Yeah. What was that experience like? I mean, when I think of Cuba and I think about just what I know it's a lot of colorism. I know there's uh, a lot of lack of opportunity. What did you learn about your family's the wherewithal, so to speak, of going abroad to get it, to chase the bag, as they say nowadays? Their willingness to make those sacrifices. What did you learn about that from your father, from your grandfather?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, my on the colorism side, I never met my grandfather, and so he didn't really share anything specifically to me about that. He did come back being bilingual, and so
Oh,
being fluent in Spanish. Um, and one of the things that he brought back, and he always had, I think, is this work ethic of doing whatever it took to take care of business for the family. And so that's a primary part of the tradition. Most people will know that if you're from the Caribbean or Africa or even Latin America, Southeast Asia, people are willing to go wherever the opportunities are. And my grandfather and my father are no exception to that. They did exactly that. And the lessons that they learned are ones that my grandfather imparted to my dad. My dad's father, my grandfather died when my dad was 14, and so, his mother had to take care of the family. At the time, she had five boys.
mm,
Two of them had already uh, migrated to the UK during the Windrush generation. They were part of that movement to help clear the way for other people to come there. I just saw a video recently where a Nigerian man in the UK was saying that we have to give thanks to the Jamaicans for coming here to clear the way in the UK for other blacks to come and make a way, because when they got there, it was a very racist environment.
yeah,
Even though Britain needed them to help rebuild after World War II, they weren't welcome uh, at all.
yeah,
They were treated like like nothing,
yeah. They
and they had
endured.
to
Mhm.
struggle to get basic rights. One of the stories that my dad told me that when he was working in New England on a construction site, he was invited by one of his white coworkers to a bar,
Mhm.
and um, when one of the white guys in the bar that didn't want him to be there, spat in his face. Um,
Mm.
and he had to make a quick decision in that moment of fight and defend his dignity as a human being, or just wipe it off and walk away because he had something greater that he was pursuing. And obviously, he pursued the latter, took the latter path of humbling himself. And, these stories I heard from my dad growing up gave me a sense of purpose,
Mm.
that what he had done, I had an obligation to it. I had an obligation to his sacrifices, even if he didn't realize the immediate optimal returns on those investments. That I would continue in that in pursuing goals that were akin to his.
Yeah. What did your father see in you? If you could predict what he thought you were going to end up doing versus what you're doing now, or did he always know that this would be the end result? And then also, what do you think he would say today if he was here, just witnessing all the great things that you've done?
I think he would be happy about it. Um, One of the things that I did, my dad taught us that there's really only three professions that you can pursue if you're a serious person in school, and
Okay.
it was to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer.
Traditional
Yeah.
man.
Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And so, obviously, I chose to be an engineer because I was, relatively good at math and I knew a little bit of physics, and yeah, I could learn that stuff real fast. And so, he was proud of that. That was the first thing that he was really extremely proud that I did engineering, got an engineering degree. Um, he would brag about that. And so, even before I did anything in business, just having a engineering degree made him extremely happy. And so, you know, I felt I
One
felt
check.
privileged that I could uh, give that honor to him while he was alive.
Yeah, yeah. That's a
Yeah.
check on the box. I know when you talk about immigrant parents, they're like, wait a
Yes.
minute. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it, man. So, when you think about just some of those conversations, take me back that conversation about someone spitting in your face and having the wherewithal to control yourself because your why is obviously a lot bigger than your feelings. I think one of the things that I always I like that you say a lot is that you would say that your father said forget your feelings.
Hmm.
Feelings about the situation don't matter. You need to wrap your mind around what it is you need to do. Tell anybody who may be want to glean something from that. What the wisdom was, what he was trying to say with that particular phrase.
Yeah, one of the principles my dad taught me was the principle to transcend my feelings, personal transcendence. He said that, this is after I finished my college degree, and he gave me two important lessons. I'll share both of them. The first one was what you just talked about. He said, if something needs to be done, how you feel about it doesn't matter. Bend your mind around it and do it. And that has always stuck with me. It's probably the most important lesson I've learned in my life, and that I use is that in this moment, what is happening and how I'm feeling is irrelevant. What is my objective? What are my goals? What's my purpose? And act in alignment with that, not with the context of the environment, not with what's going on. Remain true to that. And so that is something that shapes and molds and defined me, to the degree that people think that I'm actually hard to connect to emotionally because I don't get caught up in stuff. I'm not a shoot the breeze kind of guy. Small talk. It's what are we doing?
Yeah,
What are we trying to accomplish here? That's something I got from my dad and his seriousness about life and about your purpose in it. And I believe that I have an obligation to him to, even in death, to still honor him and to still continue down a path that would bring honor to him, and to make valuable his sacrifice so that he can feel that. All right, let me stop for a second.
yeah. No, it's a real statement, bro. I mean, when I think about you sharing the sacrifice that he made, it's very ancestral to have to come to another country and do things that um, our ancestors were enslaved to do and sacrifice in that way for your family. And I think that as men, when you kind of share that to me, and I recognize the same thing in my own father, obviously, and God bless the spirit and the energy that they brought to the country because I think it's definitely an example for us to learn from. And I say that because hearing you speak about it in our conversations when we're just talking and moving about, I feel like it's very powerful, man. And I have a lot of
Yeah,
respect for that, bro. You know what I mean?
you know, um, before my dad passed away in 2014, um, we were we were in his car together, and we were driving, and I was sharing with him a dream that I had, and he told me that dream meant that someone was going to die. This is like May, and he died in July. Uh,
Wow.
but he also shared with me a dream, and he said that um, he saw me climbing a great mountain, and that he wouldn't be able to make it to the top with me. That I would not see him in life. That he would not see me rather make it to the top.
Mm,
But and that my mom would also make it further, but she wouldn't see it to the end. Um, but that he believed, that he knew that I was going to accomplish something that made him proud and made my family proud. And my 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 dad's younger brother. My dad is the second to last, and he has a younger brother who's still alive, um,
mm,
uh, Uncle Raka. And you know, my uncle says of me that I'm the family's Joseph. I'm the one that go that went down in Egypt and kind of made it in a way that is significant for the family
That's
and the
powerful.
blessings that come from that. And so,
Yeah,
you know, I take that as being equivalent to my dad saying it.
yeah. So your Uncle Rucker, I know what. So this is Clarendon, Neil. This is
Oh
Clarendon,
yes,
Jamaica.
Clarendon. So yeah, my family is from Clarendon, Jamaica, and farm. Both side of my family are farmers, but both of my grandmothers engaged in what's called a market woman, probably in Africa, but
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Caribbean we call them
Trade.
iglas. Yeah,
Yeah,
so they went and sold stuff that their husbands uh, raised or produced in the field. And my paternal grandmother's side, my dad's side, after her husband died, she went and bought stuff, and so she would be gone for days in the market. So entrepreneurship, in a way, is also in the blood. It's in the lineage on both sides,
yeah.
and so they were both market women, and obviously, you don't know how you're being influenced.
Sure.
Both by what you're observing in the environment, but also what comes down to you through the blood and through the spirit. And so
Yeah,
I think to a certain extent, what I'm doing now as an entrepreneur is aligned with that tradition and keeping the principle of honoring them through my work.
what does Uncle Rucker say?
He's aligned, he's aligned with it, and so he's very much approve of what we're doing here in
Yeah,
to honor our father. One of the things that I do, and every year on my dad's birthday, we have either personally go or we have someone in the family put a wreath on my dad's tomb, as well as that of his his parents, his siblings who have passed away as well, and we will keep on doing that, and as well as my maternal side as well.
yeah,
Keep on doing that on the 26th of February every year, just to remember their sacrifices.
yeah. So let's talk about legacy, Neil, because you're building something very strong. Um, obviously, I've seen you come from humble beginnings and build something, mammoth, um, and accomplish some things that, a lot of times, especially if you're black, you won't even necessarily know that this exists, or this is fathomable, because you're looking at the entertainment side, right? Just a lot of us look at sports and rap. We're in a city where all these things take place, but what do you, when you think about your legacy and what you want to leave behind as it relates to honoring your father, your family, your name? What what is that? How would you articulate that?
For me, I would want my name to be remembered in the vein of someone who is a respecter of tradition, someone who's a good steward of what was given to him. And so the things that my father and my mother, my grandparents, and also my uncles and aunts have helped to create and to facilitate, I want to be remembered as someone who honored that and took it to the next level, who's not a rebel, who did not rebel against his parents, who did not uh, do evil, who did not rob other people of their goods. I'm reading a book about Ma'at, the moral ideal of ancient Egypt by Malana Karenga, and it really speaks to me because many of the things that he's talking about were practices, you know, 3 to 6,000 years ago, are things that I find myself doing as far as traditional things of honoring my father and my ancestors and making sure that we're not uh, duping people out of their money and talking evil about people and creating mischief in the community, deceiving people. Uh, I never could understand how some people do that kind of stuff. And to this moment, I'm always shocked when I see people engage in uh, what they called in ancient Egypt isfet, which is just evil, spreading falsehood about people. And so I want to be remembered as someone who traveled the path of God, somebody who was righteous. As a child, as a young kid, like 11, 12. This might sound strange to people, but since I was 11, I always wanted to be someone that whose behavior and speech was pleasing to God, because that's the kind of environment that I grew up in, with both sides of my family being extremely religious, conservative, morally upright. Um, People can say a lot of things about my maternal and paternal family. What they can say about my both of both sides of my family, uncles, aunts, grandparents, that they can't say that we are bad people. They can't say that we steal. They can't say that we steal people's land, or we lie, or we create deceit or mischief, that we are bad actors in the community. They can't say that about us. And I want to honor that tradition. I want to continue that tradition. I want to, make sure that my children continue in that tradition, and them after theirs. And so, if there is deviance, uh, I don't want to be aligned with them, and I don't want my name and tradition to be aligned with them. And so that's more important. I'm probably looking for a different answer, I would say, in the business, but the moral, ethical dimension to me is the single most important, because I believe in a hereafter. I believe that this is not it. That there is more to come after death, and so I want to have that legacy more than anything else. Of course, you want to also be successful in business and these things, but
Yeah. No, I'm not looking for another answer, Neil. I'm looking for your answer, because I understand that there are multiple pathways to get there, right? But I think that, there's some people who, of course, when you look at just being successful. I came from the entertainment side of the business. I don't
yeah,
want I don't want those things that I feel like I've seen. I think that there's a way to keep your moral high ground and your soul intact and get to your destination. So I appreciate what you say, and I'll also go, venture to say that I like how you oftentimes talk about the principle of things, and I think that
hmm
often that's lost when you're talking to
hmm
people with their wants and needs. They forego the principle for whatever it is that the moment may call for, and that can cost you a lot more later. So I respect that. I appreciate that,
yeah.
man. You know.
No, I think the moral, ethical piece of it and principles that underpin that has been, one of the things that my family, and many other families in the diaspora, people of African descent, are retained, especially people who are from rural environments, is they have not been corrupted as much by the big cities.
Yeah.
Um, and because in those environments, like where I grew up was 100% African people. There was no racial, ethnic diversity. It's just us.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot easier to retain those core principles, and those principles have informed um, the most stable families in those environments. Because a lot of times families fall apart, and by that I mean no one remembers that those guys existed, or no one continued their family legacy. And I think that's one of the greatest success stories, is being able to say that you can trace your family lineage, um, and people are continuing to honor and respect that lineage, that your children can respect the work that you have done. And I think if my son go out there today and interact with anyone, uh, they can say all kind of things that they may feel, but they cannot provide any evidence that we have violated any moral or ethical principles in dealing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
So
you
so to your point, I think that's a very important thing, and I know that's not that's not unique for me. It's something that I know many people um, in the world, and in particular, many people in the African diaspora share these core principles. And so, we want to help. Another thing that I would like to see, Ose, is for me, for my legacy, is to help restore a sense of confidence in our moral and ethical groundings as a people, so that more of our talking, more of our behavior and our speech comes out of that grounding. I think when we talk yesterday, you mentioned all the cool stuff people say about the game is to be
So
sold and not told, and get the bag at whatever it cost, and all these kind of gibberish, tef foolish things that people say that don't last. They only work for a moment. I would like to help and play a role in helping our people reground our speech and our action on these principles that have lasted, 10,000 years,
yeah,
that have helped our people survive one of the worst human calamity, which is what Dr. Marimbani calls the Ma'afa, right? That lasted 3 to 3.5, 4 centuries. And here we are today, people who are uh, born at the bottom, making it to the top in one generation on 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 those same principles and not violating them.
yeah. If there was anything that anybody watching, how would you sum this up as it relates to what you shared with your father,
Yeah,
your own experience, your own success? What would you
I
say?
would say honor your mother and your father. I would say um, no one's parents are perfect. My parents weren't perfect, but in the fact that they are your parents, honor them, um, love them, remember them, teach your, teach your children about them. Uh, I We make it an effort in our home to tell our son about my his his grandfather, my father, and great grandfather, and grandmothers, so that he knows what's expected of him, what our tradition has been. And so I think that's something that I would say to sum this up, and talk frequently about your ancestors. Remember them.
Yeah, remembrance. Man, well, thank you, bro. Thanks for sharing this. I think it's powerful, and the connection between the father and his son, and that remembrance that you're speaking of, man. I
Yeah, the last thing I'll probably add to that, Jose, is that the theme for me in all of this is being a good steward of your of the legacy of your lineage, right? Is work that out somehow. Figure out how you can be a good steward of the legacy of your lineage, because at the end of the day, that's probably the only stable thing that you can provide your to posterity, because wealth um, come and go. Um, those generations, you might build it up and be really strong, and your kids might be able to carry it on, but your great grandkids, man, there's no guarantee.
yeah,
But the legacy of your lineage legacy can be sustained more stably than wealth or material gains.
thanks per usual, brother.